The man before us had an extreme aversion to foul smells, yet here he was, opening a package of dehydrated feces. Then, disregarding the stench, he mixed it with water until it became liquid. He scooped up a spoonful and placed it in the soil, added half a potato, and sprinkled some water on top. He repeated this process across the entire plot of land. 2 weeks later, a tiny sprout broke through the soil. What you'd never guess is that this would be the man's hope for survival over the next 3 years, because he'd been abandoned alone on the distant planet Mars. 2 months earlier, while he and his crew were exploring Mars, a massive storm struck. The spacecraft couldn't withstand the wind force, and the commander ordered an emergency evacuation. But on the way to the ship, disaster struck. A flying piece of debris sent Mark flying. The commander wanted to go back for him, but the system alert showed Mark's spacesuit was compromised. He'd be dead in less than a minute. The ship was already tilting dangerously. If they didn't launch immediately, everyone would be stranded on Mars. To ensure the crew's safety, the commander had no choice but to board the ship with the others and leave Mars behind. Soon after, NASA back on Earth received the news and announced Mark's death at a press conference. What they didn't know was that Mark hadn't died from oxygen depletion. Though an antenna had pierced his suit, it had also plugged the hole, preventing oxygen from escaping. Fighting through the pain, Mark made it back to base. He checked his injuries, nothing too serious. But the base's communication equipment was damaged, leaving him unable to contact Earth. Outside, the storm still raged. Yet Mark didn't give up. The next day dawned clear on Mars. Mark rose early and began inventorying the base supplies. Based on food for 6 people for 68 days, he could stretch it to last over 400 days. But the next Mars mission was 4 years away. The food would never last that long. Then he spotted the experimental potatoes and felt a surge of hope. Mark happened to be a botanist. He planned to grow the next 3 years' worth of food right here on Mars. Meanwhile on Earth, NASA was holding Mark's funeral. But a communications officer at Mission Control decided to check the Mars base out of curiosity. He discovered the rover had moved, and the solar panels showed signs of being cleaned and repaired. This shocked the NASA director. He wasn't concerned about whether Mark was alive or dead, he worried about the public backlash when the truth came out. They'd left a living person on Mars. NASA would be crucified. The Mars mission director, however, said his biggest concern was Mark's potentially deteriorating mental state. But his worry was unnecessary. At that very moment, Mark was cheerfully listening to rock music, fresh from a shower and planning his next move. The NASA director was eventually forced to reveal the truth. He downplayed their responsibility, carefully avoiding the agency's failings. Fortunately, the Mars mission director's statement helped restore some of NASA's credibility. But this promise created a huge problem for the director. To save Mark, they'd need to send supplies immediately to keep him alive. But just building a supply rocket would take 6 months. By that calculation, Mark would starve long before help arrived. NASA's biggest headache now was figuring out how to build a spacecraft in just 3 months. Due to copyright restrictions, if you're interested, you can watch the original film The Martian.